Hi fellow crafters, my name is Terry from nutsaboutsstamping.com. Welcome to or welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have a fun technique to share with you, so grab your ink pads and your clear blocks and let's create a colorful Mother's Day card. I'm going to start off right away with the card base, which is going to be very vanilla, and it's going to be a landscape layout. And to add a little bit of visual interest to the card base, I'm going to dry emboss it using the Time Worn Type 3D embossing folder. So I'll go ahead and do that and I'll be right back. Now I'm going to set this aside for a bit while we work on a couple of layers for the card base. I have a piece of watercolor paper, and this is what I'm going to use for this technique. So what I want to do is just put a scrap piece of grid paper underneath my watercolor paper, and I'm going to use a large clear block, and this is how you're going to create the technique. I've decided to use Tahitian Tide and Daffodil Delight for my two colors for this watercolor layer. So I'm going to start off with the Daffodil Delight, and I'm going to ink up the block directly to the block itself. And then I'm going to take my Tahitian Tide and I'm just going to go over a little bit of the Daffodil Delight, but then add the Tahitian Tide to the rest of the block. So it looks like that. Then what I want to do is take one of my spritzers, and I've got just plain water in it. I'm going to turn away from my crafting space and I'm going to spritz the water fairly generously onto the clear block. So I'm going to do that. And then I am going to get my watercolor paper as straight as I can. And then I'm going to just stamp directly onto the watercolor layer and hold it down a little bit, like so. Now, as you can see, I have a lot of white space on there, and I don't want that. You may like to have some white space on yours, but I'm not very keen on it, so I'm just going to ink up my clear block a second time. And I'm going to stamp it down again on my watercolor paper, and hopefully that will then add a little bit more color. Yeah, it did. A little bit more color to my watercolor layer. So I'm just going to leave this to dry for a minute, and then I'll come back and I'll show you the next step in this fun technique. Now, while that is drying, I'm going to go ahead and create a phrase that I want to use on the front of my card. The Perennial Postage set is a sentiment-only set, which is perfect for all occasion card making. You can use one phrase on its own, or you can pair them to customize your message. So I'm going to use one phrase for the outside and then a second phrase for the inside, which is great because I only need one stamp set to do so. So I have got a scrap piece of Very Vanilla, and I've got the You Mean a World to Me stamp, and I'm going to ink it and stamp it down using my Memento Tuxedo black ink. Now, I could use my phrase just as it is, but I want to add just a nice detail to it. So I brought in my paper trimmer, and I'm just going to cut on an angle. And then I'm going to keep this piece and I'm going to use it on the other side so that I get the exact same angle. And I'm going to use my paper snips scissors, and I'm just going to trim along here using this scrap piece as my guide. And there we go. My phrase is all ready to go, and I really like the angled look. I think it's just a nice way to add a different look to the phrases on your projects. Now, I want to bring back in my watercolor paper because I think it's fairly dry. And I want to add a line art image from the Dainty Delight stamp set. So you can stamp these and custom color them using your favorite coloring tools, or you can just leave it plain. You can also stamp a single stem, which is what we're going to do, and that gives you a clean minimalist look. Or you can combine these images to sort of create a field, I guess, of wildflowers. So I've decided to use this stamp, and I'm going to bring back in my Tuxedo black ink, and I'm going to ink up the wildflower, and I'm going to stamp it down over on top of the yellow side of my watercolor layer. Isn't that cool? Now I want to bring in a layer of Tahitian Tide, and I'm going to adhere that underneath my watercolor paper using my multi-purpose liquid glue. Now I've brought back in my card base, and what I want to do now is adhere this watercolor layer to my card base. And you can see that I still have some of the embossed look coming through, which just adds, I guess, almost a matching visual coordination with how the ink landed on the watercolor paper. Now what I want to do is take my phrase and I want to adhere it down on the front of my card using my multi-purpose liquid glue. All right, so now when we're thinking about embellishments, what comes to mind for me are these pearls. So I'm going to add a couple of pearls, and then I'll show you what I did on the inside of the card. And there we go. I think my card is really beautiful and ready to send to my mother for Mother's Day. And here's what I did inside. I added another image from the Dainty Delight stamp set and the Happy Mother's Day phrase from the Perennial postage stamp set. If you would like a complete listing of everything I used to make this card and the product ordering numbers, I'll link to my blog article in the description box under this video. You can head over to my blog and you can get all the information you need. I'm Terry. I am nuts about stamping. I hope you'll give this clear block technique a try someday soon. Bye for now.